or 3 months in jail, effectively criminalising those that can't afford shelter, making poverty illegal. They can't pay the fines. They don't have the money. They don't have the support. That's why they're there in that position in the first place. Dispersing people will have unintended consequences as well, and I want to quote an email we received from Auckland City Mission last night that said they are, quote, extremely concerned these orders would displace vulnerable people from services designed to support them into housing. The mission has been located in the central city for 106 years for a reason. We meet people where they are. So to disperse people will mean less access to services. It will discourage people from seeking the help they actually need to improve their situation, which is something we all want to do. We're in an economic downturn and people already struggling on the margins are being pushed further into the spectrum of homelessness. And, you know, we can talk all day about it, but those without stable housing are far more likely to be victims of crime than perpetrators. They have obvious severe physical health issues, mental health issues sometimes, negative outcomes all the way along, pick a metric. But these people have also carried the can of a community and a society that does not invest enough in its people. They need our help. They don't need our punishment. There are community groups out there working in the space that are doing an amazing job without the resources they actually need. And shout out to Te Ohu, who met with Councillor Ferry and I recently. Real heroes of the city, doing amazing work. And think of what the cost of this bill would do to their bottom line and how many people they could help. Instead of resourcing these groups, the government have embarked on a knee-jerk Facebook post of a policy that's been put in place to punish the poor. Police themselves have gone public saying they expect significant costs rolling out this policy. That would be much better spent, as I've said before, helping people in a more sustainable way and a more compassionate way. So with our submission, I would suggest our vulnerable communities are actually looking to us for leadership. I hope that in writing our submission, we give them the leadership that they need. Thank you, Chair.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Patterson-Hamlin.
Kia ora. And yeah, tautoko what the last couple of speakers have been saying. Councillor Bartley raised some of the costing issues, and the Treasury estimates that this is an uncosted policy to the tune of about $300 million. And as Councillor Henderson was saying, I mean, we know what works. We have been told, you know, especially those of us in community committees, traversed pretty clearly. Housing first is the thing that works. Imagine what that $300 million could do if directed that way. Following the questions, yeah, I mean, clearly I would also be in the camp of just wanting to oppose, but following the discussion, I think I'm satisfied the submission would be clear in its opposition to the sort of crueler, more blunt, less workable aspects of the legislation, but do so in a productive way. I mean, as Councillor Lee has raised, you know, it's important that we try and improve the legislation before us, rather than simply, you know, digging our heels in, I suppose. And, you know, staff clearly have some helpful suggestions for the Select Committee, including where legislation already exists, which it does plentifully. So, yeah, I mean, we know, sorry, I get very angry about this one. We know what works and we know what it costs, and we know that this costs a lot of money without solving the problem at all and simply punching down. So I'll happy to second this motion. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm going to take a slightly different tack because I think that there's been very good arguments put forward about the rough sleeping and the homelessness and the need for, I thought this idea of a night shelter was outstanding, and the fact that, I mean, the reality around that is that mental health services and other wraparound services aren't being funded, and therefore homeless rough sleepers and those newly homed aren't getting the support that they need. So I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the begging side of things. And I really want to reflect back on the average Aucklander who's paid a lot of money for our transformational project in Auckland's downtown area. I'm talking about the Britomart, Quay Street, Wynyard Quarter and the waterfront. Now, with the city centre public spaces and transport projects, and there's about $4 billion been invested over there in the last decade. There's private investment down there too, 6 million probably from the private sector, and we've got the City Rail Link, 5.5. So conservatively, there's at least a $10 billion investment by ratepayers in that area of the city. So the reason why I took my questioning with the officers was how appropriate is it to have begging in that area of our city? So I'm really talking about a ring fencing area where ratepayers can actually get access and enjoy that $10 billion. And the reason why I use those words is because by visibly, I guess, reducing the begging in the downtown area of Auckland, that would improve the public investment and the private investment through at least 3 channels that I can think of. One is perception of safety and attractiveness. Now, some visitors, shoppers and tourists may perceive areas with frequent street begging as less welcoming and less safe, even though the actual crime rate might be down. But it's that perception of our city and that $10 billion investment in that area of our city. Secondly, retail and hospitality performance. Cafes, restaurants, hotels all depend on a positive customer experience, and that's a reflection of our city internationally. And finally, with that $10 billion investment in the downtown, our tourism and events, which we spend a lot of time speaking about around this table, but we're competing for visitors, conventions and events, and a cleaner, more, I guess, orderly public realm can contribute to a stronger image of our city to both Aucklanders and our international visitors. So my wish would be that the begging component stays in, but with the ability for us to be able to ring fence off areas where we want there to be no begging. And when I'm talking about begging, I'm talking about passive begging, any types of begging, whether it's aggressive or passive, for the reasons I've just outlined. There's also the ability for us to look at our own bylaw. It was mentioned by the officers that the Regulatory and Safety Committee can look at the Public Safety and Nuisance bylaw. Now, at the moment, that doesn't allow the ability for the ring fencing that I've just talked about. So that's something that we could look at and debate, and I'd like us to look at and debate and see what the political appetite looks like. Finally, I guess I'd really like to see a strongly worded logic in the submission about homelessness and rough sleeping, and the need for the funding to go in to help those most vulnerable people that are homeless, that are rough sleeping, and those who are newly housed, which need those mental health services, and there's other wraparound services that they require as well. So that would be my wish, Mr. Chair, and I'd hope I can gain support for that being included in our submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fully.
Thanks, Chair. And, you know, I've listened very carefully to what a lot of people have had to say and what our staff have had to say too. And I agree that there should be consequences for antisocial behaviour, for violent behaviour, for intimidation. But there already are, for those things, there are already powers that exist to enforce against behaviour like that. You know, those things are already a crime. And we have bylaws as well in place for things like obstruction. And staff are saying that those behaviours in the criteria in the bill, in the submission would remain, and I accept that. But it's not a crime to be poor, to be destitute, to be so poor that you are homeless, to suffer from mental issues and other health issues as well, and so that you have to sometimes find yourself begging on the streets just to get by. That behaviour alone is not a crime, and I don't think should be criminalised. And so I tautoko what staff are saying, removing that behaviour, that criteria of behaviour from the bill, from the move-on orders. And like others have said, the move on orders just move the problem on to another street, to another suburb, eventually to our suburbs further out south as well. And we've already seen that starting to happen. So it fails to actually address the problem. It just moves the problem on. And so I tautoko what Councillor Lee said and what Councillor Bartley and Henderson and Patterson-Hamlin have said too, that in our submission, I hope that we advocate for more funding to address the actual causes of the problems around homelessness. I would, support advocacy for a night shelter as well and other services. So for all of those reasons, Chair, I also wish, like Councillor Bartley, that we would have a stronger submission on this, but it is what it is, and I think staff have done their best to reflect all of the views around the table, and they've landed on a good balance, I think, of what the views around this table might be, but also what might be considered by the government of the day when they finally make a decision on it. So I will support staff recommendations for those reasons. Thank you, Chair.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you. Member Wilson.
Thank you. I don't anticipate repeating the words of Councillors Henderson, Patterson, Hamlin, Lee, Bartley and Fully, because it's obvious and it's a common view, so I appreciate the notion that I don't repeat that. What I would like to emphasise is that the haukura in the letter to the Mayor was in opposition to that, but there has to be a very pragmatic way that I think Councillor Patterson-Hamlin has indicated to have some say. So what our view is that we have some very it's a really great leadership within the Auckland Council, my view of the world. Spearheads something that we all are concerned about, and that's the reliance that I would have in terms of supporting what the staff have put together. There's an over-reliance on the leadership that's being demonstrated and continues to be demonstrated by Auckland Council, through yourself, Mr Mayor, and through the Deputy Mayor and yourself in this chair role here. And so as it moves to the delegated authority, I would expect, judging by the notions that are being expressed by here and the majority of the people, there is a stronger view that can be expressed here, but clearly has to adhere to the legislation in itself. So on that basis, I'm comforted by the notion of there being strong support for the humanistic view of what this bill is doing too, but also cleaving towards the notion we have leadership here. Let's utilise that to get us the result that all of us really want, but are to a certain extent stymied by that. So that makes it more obvious and able to be supportive of this resolution or these recommendations, Mr Chair.
Kia ora, thank you so much, Member Wilson. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Chair, and I won't repeat any number of the good comments that have been made by a variety of people around the table, but just to certainly reiterate one, and that is to perhaps use this as an opportunity to shine a bit more light on what is happening all over our city, and particularly in recent times. The city centre is well known and is very visible, but there is another big chunk of Auckland outside the city centre where homelessness is a lot less visible, no less real and no less impactful on the people that are experiencing it. I had a big clean out of a car park in the Albany ward just recently, where there must have been 25, 30 kind of cars and mobile homes and tents and whatnot with people cleared out. Number of the people on the face of it reasonably well catered for, and that they've got a kind of caravan type thing to go in. Other people not so, and some people get placed through the good works of our department, get placed in through various organisations or helpers. Others don't want to. and others who were just quite happy without any of these traits, antisocial behaviour, and now it's been quite an impact on their existence. Similarly, in other parts of the ward, people keep a really low profile if they're homeless. They don't want to be seen. So they're up early in the morning, or their cars parked, on a beachside car park or something where no one's going to see them. So the last thing you would want to see is those sort of people getting hassled to move on just because they happen to be without a home. And there is a danger of that in there with, overzealous policing and the fact that people can stand out a lot more in those sorts of parts of Auckland. So I guess, Mr. Chair, and I don't know if it's your committee or not, but I would like to signal that this is a very opportune time, I think, given the apparent interest around the table, to perhaps shine the spotlight on what's really happening all over Auckland. In many ways, what happens in the city is very identifiable and in some ways a lot more straightforward to deal with. And Councillor Lee certainly came up with a good suggestion there about night shelters. Further out, it's no less impactful on the people that are affected. I mean, someone mentioned about getting people help into the various housing and service. Some people don't want to go there, some just because they don't want to, and that's a reflection of their mental state. Other people because they don't want to go there because it doesn't help their drug addiction, because there's behaviour there that they're very mindful of. So it is complex, but we have increasing numbers of people who certainly do need help and assistance, and it would be nice in amongst all the variety of work that we deal with in this place, which in recent years seems to have been narrowly focused in terms of budgets and whatnot, and committee structures have reflected that. If we maybe look out a bit further to the vulnerable, and particularly the vulnerable right across Auckland, many of whom are just not noticed, are just somehow getting by, and I don't know what sort of an existence is. It's not too cheery. So if through your good work, Mr. Chair, we could look to make this something that has a follow-up other than just the immediacy of this submission, I'd appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, kia ora, Councillor, thank you. And we can either bring something to the full committee, because we have had some information come to Council Ferry's committee, but I think, as you say, maybe a workshop, a combined workshop or something, so everyone can be involved in that conversation. So thank you. Member Blair, kia ora.
Tēnā tātou. As a member of Haukura, we must oppose the move-on orders, as has been clearly and obviously stated. It will not solve homelessness. As I walk up and down Te Waihorotu and through Te Pokapū, through our central city, it's obvious to me and everybody ko te nuinga he Māori. Most of our people on the streets have whakapapa Māori. And that's because of our history of dispossession. At 1840, we ran everything, we controlled all of the resources, and we actually housed homeless Pākehā arriving on the shores at the bottom of Queen Street here, and we fed them too. Fast forward to now, I see on the faces of the people on Queen Street their illustrious ancestry, their ancestors behind their eyes that are often glazed over. So these move-on orders will not solve anything, but neither will paternalism, which we've had through the state housing programs, where we're holding people at a level and not advancing them any further in their hope for home ownership. So I just want to challenge, as we hammer the crown here, what are we doing as a council in terms of changing the economic conditions of those Māori? This is the largest Māori city in the world. This is the largest Pacifica city in the world. What are we doing with our $8 to $10 billion investment every year around lifting the economic conditions and pay packets of our Pacifica Māori people? That ultimately is the way to resolve this recent homelessness issue in our communities. So as you are going through your review of all of these 10-year contracts, I urge you to ask these multinational companies, what are they doing beyond offering a few jobs here and there to our people on minimum wage, which they will probably get, and they won't be getting any further. So I think we need to look internally here ourselves, and also how do we unlock the Māori land that is still out there, held in multiply owned Māori ownership across our region. How can this, the largest local body in the country, lean on others, the neighbours to the north and south, to open up and unlock Māori land so that we can house our people again. It's the hardest thing to do, is to build on multiply owned Māori land. And so what are we doing about it other than whacking government? Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Councillor. Kia ora, Member Blair. Thank you. Councillor Winiata.
Kia ora, Member Blair. I'm quite stuck in between both, really. It's not just the town centres that are affected by people that are rough sleeping, and our community deserves the right to feel safe too. We've got a number of beautiful coastal walkways and boardwalks, one of which around the back of Mole Place and Wattle Downs, where homeless people, rough sleepers, have congregated off the beaten path, where children and residents use these areas a lot, and as they should when we've got a beautiful coastline like we do down there around the Pahurihuri. One instance in particular, a resident found a gentleman who was, I guess, tweaked off his brains, had some property down on the coastline in a nice little grassy area of a reserve. Police were called, removed the gentleman, but the resident noticed that his property was still there. Police said, you can't touch the property, it says, but as the law states, they can't hold him for any more than 24 hours. And sure enough, as I was down discussing this property with the resident on site, the gentleman returned, as he was going to just keep coming back. So without the availability of any services to come in the time frame that was probably most appropriate, I drove him down to the Weymouth Kosi Club where Maranga Whānau was based at the time. They followed process. They managed to get him housed and showered. However, it's not the only instance where safety of the public does come into question. I'm aware that there's another homeless person, rough sleeper, in a playground who had a history of sexual assault on minors. And he was hiding out in an area of Manarewa in the corner of a playground. So when we look at the move-on orders, I think the fines are BS, but we don't know the history behind these people. And while mental health and safety of those that are rough sleeping is a priority, we also can't forget the possible position that we're putting our children into when they're just heading down to the local playground or parks, because in Manarewa it is a very real situation. It's not anything that where it's out of sight, out of mind. It is very in your face. We see it every day. But there's also the presence of the begging and rough sleepers that restrict the ability of the community township in Southmore Village to grow and attract positive business because of the behaviours and instances of begging that are constantly around. It pushes away good business and it doesn't attract anything. When your town centre is focused on security of business rather than growing it and making it thrive, something needs to change. I don't know that the move-on orders here address everything specifically outside of what the current legislation already does. Fining them is not going to make any difference, but I support that something needs to be done. However, we're also stretched in terms of the services that we can look to support them. And in each case that I have followed, especially with the gentleman who was on drugs that I drove myself, I did notice him outside the Manarewa Library a few months later. So he's still around, he's still homeless, with no intention on looking at being housed in a situation that we could otherwise provide him through social services. So thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you. Mayor Brown.
I'm reluctant to enter this debate because it's complicated. And what worries me, I've never been a great fan for simplistic solutions to very complicated problems. And this is a very simplistic solution to a very complicated problem. We've already moved our house as a result of a simplistic solution. Kay Road was nice and edgy, then it became dangerous because somebody in the government in Wellington decided to buy a tourist hotel and fill it up with 501s, thereby concentrating the market for P in Auckland into one street, wrecking a dozen hospitality businesses and causing trouble. And we hear a lot of calls for mental health as if this is a mental health thing that you can fix. But the mental health is not like, mental health doesn't offer cures like surgery does. This is a very, I now that I understand I'm up there as part of the people that are doing this, having heard here, there's probably 20 completely different viewpoints on what we should be saying here. It kind of astonishes me that the staff would actually even feel that they had the right to make a submission on our behalf, particularly when they haven't gone out and spoken to the businesses affected, they haven't gone out and spoken to the mental health providers. In my view, my submission would be to the government, I understand there's a problem here, but you've got to do a bit more thinking than this. It's more complex. You have some responsibilities here. You do run the health department, you do run the police department, and you are telling us constantly via yet another bigging organisation. One of the worst offenders for bigging is the Auckland Ratepayers Alliance, who are out there bigging online all day long for supporters. And some people are actually listening to that rubbish. So if you want to ban bigging, it's got to be online and on-street bigging. It's sometimes our compliance people add to the problem. And a pub in Otahu, which people like to go to because it's safe. We have restrictions on our licence because a number of these non-complying people drink out on the street. We don't serve grog that they can buy at somewhere else. They behave badly and leave stuff outside my pub, and the net result of our compliance people have put a question mark on the licence on the pub because of people who don't go to the pub behaving with drink that they bought outside. It's very complicated. So what do we say, having listened to everybody around here? I just think that the submission should be saying, well, the government, you recognise there's a problem. There are serious issues here. You are responsible for people's behaviour. We are responsible for places. And I think you should think again and have another crack at it. This is not going to solve the problem. It's not supposed to solve the problem of poverty, but it is supposed to solve the problem of difficulties associated with the people surrounding this stuff. And I know that in Lower Ponsonby, I actually know the names of the people who are on the street permanently. And sometimes I say good morning and give them a coffee, and sometimes they tell me to F off at the top of their voice. And I'm not quite sure which of those people are showing up, but I recognise them as the same people. It's very complicated. We took $500,000 of the Mayor's budget last year and paid for wardens, and I went out with the wardens, and it's not a nice job. I feel sorry for the people who are paying huge amounts of rates who have these people outside them, and they want them moved on for very good reasons. But I'm not quite sure what the solution is. So what are we going to say? What are we going to say? They're very different around here. I think we should say that this is a problem, government. This is your first crack at it. Do better. We know there's a problem. You keep telling us to stick to our knitting. This is yours. So I'd be happy to have clear advice as to what I'm supposed to say here in supporting this stuff here. I sympathise with almost everybody's point of view around here. This doesn't solve poverty. It doesn't, and just relying on mental health isn't helping either, because I've run hospitals here, and those people aren't cured in a hospital. They are protected from themselves and from other people in a hospital. And if you block them up in the hospital, then the next thing we have problems with that. That's not a good solution either.
Hey, Mike, shh. Sorry, Chair.
Well, you've escaped to an island, mate. I live in this.
Councillor Lee, no one has interrupted anyone. Just, that's not a good way to.
I'm sorry, that's been provocative.
And,
And you're not?
Well,
okay,
it's part of democracy.
I'm
no, well,
not a schoolroom.
that's okay. But right now I'm the chair and I've asked you to stop yelling out across while other people are talking.
So I'm just seeking some guidance because it's very complicated. And I think it is a simplistic solution to something which is way more complicated. But I don't think removing bigging and rough sleeping is that in itself can be provocative. The lady I know in Ponsonby manages to rough sleep in a manner that doesn't upset people's businesses. Other ones do. And so there you go. So I don't like bigging bowls, and I particularly don't like the Auckland Ratepayers Alliance bigging bowl. It's a very complicated issue, so please give me some clarity about what we're going to do for this thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Baker.
So I guess the reason we're talking about this is that the public have made it pretty clear in some ways that, they want the government to act, and they are doing that. And whether we like it or not, they are trying to do it. I guess the problem that we have is that we don't have a submission to actually look at and look at. And so we've sort of got a reference to themes. But, what are those themes? And so it would have been easier potentially to have actually a draft submission to look at, so that we're not sort of just making it up and then leaving it for people to rattle out something on our behalf. And because all I've heard today is just a mix of everyone's got a different view. I think, and Morris made a really good point before, and Shane talked about the heroes, and the people that get involved in that sort of stuff are heroes, but so are the people that employ people and have businesses and add to the vibrancy of the city. So they're heroes as well, and so we do have to have a balanced approach to this. And I hope, like hell, that our submission is balanced. I take, what the staff said before. This is just providing a tool for the police, because at the moment they're pretty limited tools. And so, if they want to react to complaints or things like that, really they're left with having to arrest someone, which isn't a great outcome for just about everybody. And so this provides a tool to enable them to sort of try and do things in a softer manner. It's not just a city centre issue. And, this is something different. If we continue to do the same thing and expect a different result, you know what that leads to and what that's
called.
And so, we've got people who have moved to Pukekohe and Waiuku because they've moved out of here because it's easier. And so every little town, every little place has these issues. I think this is a response to a demand from the public, and we just got to get on and do what we think is right. I hope that we have a balanced approach in our submission and don't try and send a political message to the government who we might not like their policy for some, but I think we need a balanced approach for what is right for all of Auckland, not just a certain sector. So that's what I hope to see from our submission.
Are there any other speakers before I just finish up? No. To Mayor, I guess we did traverse a lot of what will be in the submission. The paper is very clear on the direction of what will be in the submission. I know there's been differing views, but we haven't had amendments to add or change the direction in the paper. This is us trying to be as balanced as possible, but also taking the views of what is and isn't happening. What we've seen over the last 2 years, shown up in our 6 monthly reports to the Community Committee, is the dramatic tap being turned off for the emergency housing. Not that emergency housing is a solution for long-term accommodation, but not having that intermediary place between the street and a permanent home created 100% increase in visible rough sleeping in our city, not just the city centre. We've seen it across all of our our town centres and suburbs, and you've had many people, organisations, even on the shore, who are not normally talking out, speaking out because they know they receive government funding, giving really clear concerns about the change to policy that doesn't allow certain people to get emergency housing that used to, but also the reduction in numbers from 850 in Auckland to about 30 places in a 3-month period. It is a significant change for the organisations to try and get on top on is not possible. As to Councillor Baker's point, I think we're being clear in here that yes, there can be a tool for the destructive behaviours, disorderly, intimidating, threatening, disruptive, obstructing. That's why we don't have the full opposition, withdrawal the bill here, because I think clearly the police are saying that this would give them those, but also this submission will be saying we are removing, or we say there shouldn't be move-on orders for homelessness, rough sleeping and begging, because it is only moving the problem down the road to Victoria Park, up to Ponsonby, wherever, for 24 hours. And our submission is definitely going to say, Mayor, what is possible, where the investment needs to go, what government could do to help us, what we could do. We've spoke about it, Josephine, Julie, others, at our LTP sessions, that should we be putting more funding in, obviously to help partner with the government and organisations, mana whenua, iwi authorities, who are all doing this work, marae, etc. So I want to be clear that we are taking as much views as possible, but what is in the agenda paper of that nuance is the direction that will be put in the submission going forward. So all those in favour? Any opposed?
No, I'm against.
Cool. So would you like that?
Yes, I'd like my vote recorded opposed, please.
Okay.
I had my hand up for a question, Mr. Chair, before you move the motion.
Hang on a sec. We've just
confirm, if you could, please.
hang on a sec.
We support move-on orders for a whole lot of
So this is out of order. We've just voted on it. We had questions and comments. So we had. Could I please have hands up who would like their names recorded against the putting in submission? This is exactly how we do every submission, almost every submission, unless we have time to bring the full submission back. This is every committee does this.
practice, no blank checks.
So the proposal is very clear. What will be the direction, and the submission, the resolution says the feedback on key submission themes outlined in the report to inform the final submission. Anyway, so who would like their votes reported against? So Councillor Turner, Councillor Lee, Councillor Sayers, Councillor Burns, Councillor Fletcher. Thank you. Right, so...
And I've put a no in the chat and said no verbally.
Thank you. Right, so we're going to move to lunch. So we'll come back at 1:15 from lunch.